Mycorrhizal Films presents Gathering Edible Wild Plants in the Eastern Woodlands and Beyond, a film by Nathan Carlos Rubley with music by Douglas Thomas. Welcome to Gathering Edible Wild Plants in the Eastern Woodlands and Beyond. My name is Nathan Carlos Rubley, and I'm currently a stay-at-home dad, freelance artist, and aspiring hunter-gatherer. Gathering edible wild plants has been an obsession of mine for a little over 5 years, and I have been teaching foraging classes for about 3 years. While I don't consider myself an expert, I know the plants I use and have eaten every plant featured in this film numerous times. So what is this film? It is a series of edible plant profiles that provides assistance in identification, some basic information about the plants and their uses, and high-quality close-ups of the various parts of the plants. What is it not? It is not a standalone resource. Identification is a learned skill, and all sources should be cross-referenced. It is also not a source of groundbreaking information. In other words, I owe strongly to people like Sam Thayer, Arthur Haynes, John Kalis, and the other authors mentioned in the last section of the film. While medicinal uses are occasionally mentioned in passing, it is also not a medicinal plant film. This film is also not meant to provide the absolute latest in botanical classification. I used the second edition of The Plants of Pennsylvania by Ann Fowler Rhodes and Timothy A. Block for family, genus, and species name. I'm sure a few of these have been updated since this edition came out. What regions does this film cover? The main focus is plants that grow in the eastern woodlands, but I have purposely chosen many plants that are widespread weeds, growing not only across the US, but in many other places too. What is foraging? Gathering edible wild plants, often known as foraging, is a fun hobby and source of free, healthy food. Wild plants tend to have more nutrients than domesticated ones. All of us owe our lives to ancestors who were successful at foraging food from the natural landscape. Is foraging safe? Yes, as long as we learn each plant and get to know its unique qualities and challenges, foraging is very safe. Part of the knowing the plants is identification. I recommend learning both how to key out plants in field guides and how to go through and compare each part of the plant to detailed descriptions and images. What other concerns are there? Each plant may have parts or stages of growth that are not edible, or they may need to be processed in some way to make them edible. Where the plants are growing can also be important too. The bad news is we live in a polluted world, so we need to consider not harvesting from places like ditches near busy roads and industrial areas. Unfortunately, we also need to be aware that many people and public parks spray herbicides and other chemicals in many of the most promising places for foraging. The good news is that some of these plants can also help our bodies and ecosystems deal with pollution. Any final thoughts before we get started? Yes, foraging is a great way to connect to the natural world and reduce our impact on it. That being said, there are a few things to consider. Most of the plants in this film are considered weeds, but some are not, and all of them are living beings. Part of learning to gather edible wild plants is learning how to harvest them in a sustainable, respectful, and even regenerative manner. Start by learning the ins and outs of the plants' lives and how to minimize the disturbance you cause to the plants you harvest and their surroundings. Later, as you grow as a forager, learn ways to gather that actually help to improve the health and biodiversity of the areas you frequent. Now let's get to know the plants.